Chapter 5 What's in a Name? Part 1. The new baby at Silverbush did not get its name until 3 weeks later, when Mother was able to come downstairs and the nurse had gone home, much to Judy's satisfaction. She approved of Miss Martin as little as Miss Martin approved of her. "Uh-oh, legs and lipstick," she would say contemptuously when Miss Martin doffed her regalia and went out to take the air, which was unjust to Miss Martin, who had no more legs than other women of the fashion, and used her lipstick very discreetly. Judy watched her down the lane with a malevolent eye. "Uh-oh, but I'd like to be putting a tinnier on that one, wanting to call the wee treasure Greta. Uh-oh, Greta, and her with a grandfather that died and come back to life, that he did." "Did he really, Judy Plum?" "He did that. Old Jimmy Martin was dead as a doornail for 2 days. The doctor said it. Then he come back to life, just to spite his family, I'm telling ye. But, as ye might expect, he was never the same again. His relations were rail ashamed of him. Miss Martin needn't be holding that red head of hers so high." "But why, Judy?" asked Sid. "Why were they ashamed of him?" Oh, when you're dead, it's only decent to stay dead," retorted Judy. "You'd think she'd remember that when she was trying to boss folks who looked after her babies afore she was born or thought of, the plum-faced thing. But she's gone now, good riddance, and we won't have her stravaging around the house with a puss on her mouth any more. Too many bushels for a small canoe. It do be that's the trouble with her." "She can't help her grandfather, Judy," said Pat. "Oh, I'm not saying she could, me Joe. We none of us can help our ancestors. Wasn't me own grandmother something of a witch? But it's sure we've all got some, and it ought to keep us humble." Pat was glad Miss Martin was gone, not because she didn't like her, but because she knew she would be able to hold the baby oftener now. Pat adored the baby. How in the world had Silverbush ever got on without her? Silverbush without the baby was quite unthinkable to Pat now. When Uncle Tom asked her gravely if they had decided yet whether to keep or drown the baby, she was horrified and alarmed. "Sure, me jewel, he was only teasing ye," comforted Judy, with her great broad, jolly laugh. "'Tis just an old bachelor's idea of a joke." They had put off naming the baby until Miss Martin had gone, because nobody really wanted to call the baby Greta, but didn't want to hurt her feelings. The very afternoon she left, they attended to the matter. Or tried to. But it was no easy thing to pick a name. Mother wanted to call it Doris, after her own mother, and Father wanted Rachel, after his mother. Winnie, who was a romantic, wanted Elaine, and Joe thought Dulcie would be nice. Pat had secretly called it Miranda for a week, and Sidney thought such a blue-eyed baby ought to be named Violet. Aunt Hazel thought Kathleen just the name for it, and Judy, who must have her say with the rest, thought Amaryllis was a rail classy name. The Silverbush people thought Judy must mean Amaryllis, but were never sure of it. In the end, Father suggested that each of them plant a named seed in the garden and see who's come up first. That person should have the privilege of naming the baby. "If we find more than one up at once, the winners must plant over again," he said. This was a sporting chance, and the children were excited. The seeds were planted and tagged and watched every day. But it was Pat who thought of getting up early in the mornings to keep tabs on the bed. Judy said things came up in the night. There was nothing at dark, and in the morning there you were. And there Pat was on the 8th morning, just as the sun was rising, up before anyone but Judy. You would have had to got up before you went to bed if you meant to get ahead of Judy. And Pat's seed was up. Just for one moment she was exalted. Then she grew sober and her long-lashed amber eyes filled with troubled wonder. Of course, Miranda was a lovely name for a baby, but Father wanted Rachel. Mother had named her and Sidney. Uncle Tom had named Joe. Hazel had named Winnie. Surely it was Father's turn. He hadn't said much. Father never said much. But Pat knew somehow that he wanted very badly to name the baby Rachel. In her secret heart, Pat had hoped that Father's seed would be first. She looked around her. No living creature in sight except Gentleman Tom, sitting darkly on the cheese stone. Next moment her seed was yanked out and flung into the burdock patch behind the henhouse. Dad had a chance yet. But luck seemed against poor Dad. Next morning Winnie's and Mother's seeds were up. Pat ruthlessly uprooted them too. Wind didn't count, and Mother had named 2 children already. That was plenty for her. Joe's met the same fate next morning. Then popped up Sid's and Judy's. Pat was quite hardened in rascality now, and they went. Anyhow, no child ever ought to be called Amaryllis. The next day there was none up. Pat began to be worried. Everyone was wondering why none of the seeds were up yet. Judy darkly insinuated that they had been planted the wrong time of the moon, and perhaps Father's wouldn't come up at all. Pat prayed very desperately that night if it might be up the next morning. It was. Pat looked about her in triumph, quite untroubled as yet by her duplicity. She had won the victory for Father. Oh, how lovely everything was. Gossamer clouds of pale gold floated over the hill of the mist. The wind had fallen asleep among the silver birches. The tall firs among them quivered with some kind of dark laughter. The fields were all around her like great gracious arms. The popples, as Judy called them, were whispering around the granary. The world was just as big, smiling greenness with a vast alluring blueness seawards. There was a clear, pale, silvery sky over her, and everything in the garden seemed to have burst into bloom overnight. Judy's big clump of bleeding heart by the kitchen door was hung with ruby jewels. The country was sprinkled with white houses in the sunrise. A stealthy kitten crept through the orchard. Thursday was licking his sleek little chops on the windowsill of his beloved granary. A red squirrel chattered at him from a bough of the maple tree over the well. Judy came out to draw a bucket of water. "Oh, Judy, Father's seed is up!" cried Pat. She wouldn't say up first because that wasn't true. "Oh, Judy accepted the sign with good grace. "Well, it do be your dad's turn for a fact, and Rachel is a better name than Greta any day. Greta! The impudence of it." Part 2. Rachel it was in fact, and Rachel it became in law one Sunday 6 weeks later when the baby was baptized at church in a wondrous heirloom christening robe of violet embroidery that Grandmother Gardner had made for her first baby. All the Silverbush children had been christened in it. Long robes for babies had gone out of fashion, but Judy Plum would not have thought the christening lawful if the baby had not been at least 5 feet long. They tacked Doris on to the name, too, by way of letting Mother down easy, but it was Dad's day of triumph. Pat was not sorry for what she had done, but her conscience had begun to trouble her a bit, and that night, when Judy Plum came in to leave her nightly blessing, Pat, who was wide awake, sat up in bed and flung her arms around Judy's neck. "Oh, Judy, I did something. I suppose it was bad. I wanted Father to name the baby, and I pulled up the seeds as fast as they came up in the mornings. Was it very bad, Judy?" "Uh-oh, shocking," said Judy, with a contradictory twinkle in her eyes. "If Joe knew, he'd put a tinnier on you, but I'll not be telling. More betoken as I wanted your dad to have his way. He do be put upon by the women in this house, and that's a fact." "His seed was the last one to come up," said Pat, "and Aunt Hazel's never came up at all." "Uh-oh, didn't it now?" giggled Judy. "It was up the morning afore your dad's, and I pulled it out myself."